The UK unemployment rate just dropped. On paper, that sounds like good news. In fact, on paper, it is good news. The trouble is, we're not living on paper right now. We're living in the middle of an Iran war energy shock, a looming recession, and an economy that economists are describing. And I want you to really absorb this phrase as the calm before the storm. Welcome to Britain in April 2026, where the good news arrives gift-wrapped in a warning label. Welcome back to British Reform. Let's get into it. So here are the headline figures from the Office for National Statistics, released today. The UK unemployment rate for December 2025 to February 2026 came in at 4.9%. That's down from 5.2% in the previous quarter. Total unemployment fell by 60,000 on the quarter to around 1.78 million. Employment ticked up, full-time work is increased, and wage growth came in at 3.8% including bonuses. If you were reading those numbers in isolation, you might almost feel cheerful. You might make a cup of tea. You might briefly consider that things are turning a corner. And then you'd look out the window at a geopolitical situation that has sent energy prices through the roof, and you'd put the tea down. Because here's the thing about these ONS figures that every single economist is flagging today. They cover December 2025 to February 2026. That is before the full impact of the Iran war landed on the British economy. This data is essentially a snapshot of how the UK was doing before the storm hit. It tells us the house was in reasonable shape. It does not tell us what the house looks like now that the roof is coming off. The EY Item Club, one of the most closely watched economic forecasters in the country, has been brutally clear about what comes next. They are warning that Britain is heading toward a technical recession, with the economy expected to flatline across the second and third quarters of this year. GDP growth for the full year is now forecast at just 0.7%, down from 1.4% last year. And unemployment, they are projecting it rises to 5.8% by mid-2027. That is nearly 250,000 additional job losses. The Item Club is calling it the biggest hit to the UK labour market since the pandemic. Let that land for a second. Now let's talk about why Britain is particularly exposed here, because this is where it gets genuinely important rather than just alarming. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which roughly a fifth of the world's oil supply passes, has been disrupted by the Iran conflict. The International Energy Agency has called it the largest supply disruption in global oil market history. Petrol prices in the UK have already risen by over 25 pence per litre since the conflict began. Diesel has gone up by nearly 49 pence per litre. That is not an abstract economic statistic. That is every delivery driver, every commuter, every small business owner in this country feeling it directly in their pocket every single week. And it doesn't stop at the petrol pump. Energy bills are rising. Suppliers are passing costs on. Consumers are tightening their belts. Deloitte's latest survey of chief financial officers at major UK companies found that business confidence has collapsed to its lowest levels since the pandemic. Companies are shifting into defensive mode, cutting hiring plans, preserving cash, and scaling back investment. When businesses stop hiring, unemployment goes up. It really is that direct connection. The IMF, meanwhile, has delivered the kind of verdict that governments do not put on election leaflets. The UK faces the largest growth downgrade among all G7 nations, with a forecast of just 0.8% growth for 2026. Of all the major developed economies, Britain is expected to take the sharpest hit. That is partly because the UK imports a significant portion of its gas. It is partly because our economy is so heavily service-oriented, meaning it is uniquely sensitive to consumer confidence shocks. And it is partly because our mortgage market is unusually exposed to interest rate expectations, and those expectations have shifted in recent weeks from cuts to potential hikes. Here's the cruelest part of all this. The February GDP figures showed growth of 0.5%, the fastest monthly expansion since January 2024. The economy was genuinely showing signs of momentum. Businesses were adapting to the budget cost increases. Hiring was picking up. Wages were rising faster than inflation. Victoria Scholar at Interactive Investor summed it up perfectly. She called today's unemployment data the calm before the storm. The numbers look decent precisely because they predate the moment everything changed. Rachel Reeves has promised expanded support for energy-intensive industries and has summoned the bosses of Barclays, HSBC, Lloyds, NatWest, Santander, and Nationwide to discuss what the banks can do to cushion the blow for households and businesses. The Bank of England, for its part, is expected to hold interest rates steady rather than hike aggressively. The EY Item Club forecasts rates on hold throughout 2026, on the basis that a fragile economy simply cannot absorb the kind of tightening the bank deployed during the post-Ukraine energy crisis of 2022. That is cold comfort for working families already stretching their budgets. Holding rates steady does not bring petrol prices down. It does not reduce energy bills. It does not reverse the hiring freezes that are already taking hold across the private sector. What it does is prevent things from getting even worse even faster, which, right now, is about as optimistic as the economic commentary gets. The unemployment drop to 4.9% is real. It is a genuine improvement on where we were. But it is also, in the context of everything bearing down on this economy right now, almost beside the point. The question was never whether Britain was in decent shape in February. The question is what shape it will be in by the end of the year. And the honest answer, from the IMF to the EY Item Club to every economist watching the data today, is that nobody is feeling optimistic. That is where we are on British reform. If you want daily coverage of what is actually happening to this country, the numbers, the politics, the implications, subscribe right now and stay with us. Because in British politics and economics right now, there is never a slow day.